Welcome to the open mic. It is really good to have you here with us. Today we are going off script a little bit.
And we should say right up front, this is a heavy topic.
It is. And I have to be honest with you and with you listening right now, I wasn't quite prepared for the source material we're covering today. I picked up this article, Turning the Tide on Suicide, A Widow's Mission by Caroline Roodhouse. And I honestly expected, a standard corporate mental health piece.
Oh, I know the type.
Right, 5 ways to be mindful at your desk or something like that.
Lots of buzzwords. Maybe a statistic about lost productivity, a graph or two. We see them all the time.
All the time. But about halfway through this article, I had to physically put it down. I was sitting in my office, just staring at the wall, and I found myself. I was weeping.
Wow.
And I don't mean just getting a little misty-eyed. I mean, I was genuinely shaken. Because this isn't a white paper. It's a ghost story. But, and this is the reason we're doing this, it's also a map.
That is a very precise way to put it. It's a map of a territory most of us, we hope we never have to enter. But statistically, many of us will.
That's a scary thought.
It is. And the map starts on a specific date. We are talking about November 12th, 2018. It's a date that marks the end of one life and the complete shattering of several others. We are talking about a man named Steve.
Right.
But if we only treat this as a tragedy, we are failing the source material. We're failing Caroline's mission.
That's the thing, isn't it? She didn't write this just to vent her grief, as understandable as that would be. She wrote it to introduce us to concepts that, frankly, I had never really understood before.
Concepts like the tunnel?
The tunnel, yes. And red flags that don't actually look like red flags at all. She wrote it to explain how a widow, through this unimaginable grief, ends up changing global industrial safety standards.
That's the mission part of the title. It's incredible. But before we get to the global standards and, the BSI, we have to start with the human element. We have to start with Steve.
And we have to start with the question that I think terrifies every single person listening to this, whether they admit it or not.
Which is?
How do you spot the signs of a life or death crisis when the person standing right in front of you looks completely, utterly normal?
Normal. That is the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It haunts every single paragraph of this piece.
It really does. So let's look at the subject. Let's look at Steve. Based on Caroline's description, if you lined up 10 men from his demographic, you would not be able to pick him out as the one in danger.
Not a chance. You wouldn't pick him out of a lineup of 100. Steve was 47. His wife, Caroline, was 39. They had a story that so many people would recognize.
A very familiar story.
Yeah. They met back in 2000. They did that classic young couple trajectory. They went backpacking in Spain. They lived up in Australia for a bit. They had that period of, expansive freedom before life gets serious.
But by 2018, they are deep in what you might call the infrastructure phase of life. The backpacking is long over.
Oh, yeah. They have a 9-year-old daughter, Evie, and a toddler, Ada, who is just 2. And this is something I really appreciated in the article. Caroline is brutally honest about the state of their marriage at that point. She didn't paint some perfect fairy tale picture.
No, she didn't retroactively romanticize it, which would be so easy to do.
Right. She said the honeymoon phase was long gone. They were tired. They were parents of a toddler. Anyone listening who's been there knows what that's like. But she describes them as mostly happy.
Mostly happy. Let's just sit with that phrase for a second. It sounds almost boring, doesn't it? But in a good way. In a stable, comfortable, real-life kind of way.
It's the definition of a successful, long-term marriage for millions and millions of people. It implies stability. It implies a partnership that works. It's not fireworks every day. It's life.
And Steve himself, he's described as a lovely, funny, decent bloke.
Yeah. And that he just wanted a quiet, easy life. This is key. He wasn't some tortured artist. He wasn't an addict. He wasn't a guy who lived on the edge. He was a dad who probably wanted to watch the football and have a Sunday roast.
A completely normal guy.
The epitome of normal.
Which brings us to the morning of November 12, 2018. If you were writing this as a movie, this is where you'd cue the ominous music, right? You'd have a storm brewing outside or some big fight at the breakfast table.
But there was nothing. It was just a Monday.
A mundane, gray Monday.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to look really closely at the details because the clues, or maybe the lack of them, are so important. Caroline mentions a really specific physical detail.
I know the one you mean.
She woke up with a sore throat. This detail it wrecked me when I read it. She had a sore throat, a minor everyday annoyance. And Steve, the man who we now know is literally hours away from ending his life, he doesn't seem withdrawn. He doesn't seem distant or catatonic. What does he do?
He runs up the stairs. She says he flew up the stairs to get her throat sweets.
Okay, stop right there. I need to push back on this because it just doesn't compute for me. Physiologically, psychologically, how is that even possible?
What do you mean?
If you are in enough pain to end your life, if you are that deep in the darkness, how do you have the empathy, the mental space, the executive function to worry about your wife's scratchy throat?
It seems impossible.
It's a phenomenon that confuses almost everyone who hasn't really studied this because it flies in the face of what we think depression looks like.
Mm-hmm.
We think of depression or suicidal ideation as a total shutdown of the personality, like the lights are off.
Right. You'd think he'd barely be able to get out of bed, let alone care about throat lozenges. Exactly. But often, it involves what experts call masking or high-functioning depression. It's more than just putting on a brave face, though. It goes deeper. It's about the preservation of a role.
Preservation of a role, what does that mean?
Steve was a husband. He was a father. He was a provider. That identity, that role were still intact, perhaps even operating on a kind of autopilot, right alongside the private despair.
So he could be two things at once.
He can be two people in one body. It shows that suicide isn't always born from a total collapse of function. You can be incredibly high-functioning and critically suicidal at the very same time. He was performing his duty as a caring husband, because that's who he was, even if another part of him was dying.
So he gives her the sweets?
He gives her the sweets. He kisses her goodbye. He says, "See you later."
And he makes a promise. He says he'll pick up their daughter, Evie, from Cubs that evening.
That promise is just. It's a devastating detail. It adds another layer of complexity to the psychology here.
Because what does it mean? Was he still fighting it?
It could mean a few things. It suggests he was either fighting the urge until the very last second, trying to hold on to his responsibilities, or his perception of time and reality had become so distorted that he thought he could somehow, opt out of life but still fulfill his duties. It doesn't make logical sense to us, but the logic inside that private torment is very different.
Or maybe he just didn't want to worry her.
That's the simplest explanation and probably the most likely. It's a final act of protection. Don't sound the alarm.
So he walks out the door. As far as Caroline is concerned, he's going to the office. The clock ticks. 9 a.m., 10 a.m., it hits 10:30.
And the phone rings. It's his office. Steve isn't here.
Now, I want to ask you, the listener, to really put yourself in Caroline's shoes right now. You get that call, your spouse isn't at work. What is your first thought? Be honest. It is not suicide.
Never. The brain just doesn't go there.
Yeah.
You think. Car trouble. He's stuck in traffic. Maybe he stopped for a coffee and lost track of time.
Your brain is literally wired to protect you from the worst-case scenario. It's a psychological defense mechanism. You look for the logical, mundane explanation first.
Of course. So Caroline calls his mobile phone. It goes to voicemail. She calls his work phone. Straight to voicemail.
And now the temperature in the room starts to drop. The denial starts to crack a little bit. She starts calling hospitals.
Makes sense. She's looking for a car accident. She's looking for a physical trauma.
Because physical trauma is something we can understand. We have a script for car accidents. We know what to do if someone breaks a leg. We do not have a script for a disappearing husband who seemed perfectly fine at breakfast.
There's no script for that. Finally, when all the hospitals say no, he's not here, she has to make the calls she's dreading. She calls the police. And this begins a period that she calls the limbo.
This limbo lasted for 2 days. 2 days of trying to parent a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old while internally you're just screaming into the void.
Can you even imagine?
I can't. And the police interaction here is, well, reading it now, with the benefit of hindsight, it feels so frustrating. It feels almost negligent, though I know they were just following their protocol. They arrive that first night, and the first thing they do is search the house.
And Caroline was completely baffled by this. She's standing there saying, "He left for work. I saw him get in the car and drive away. Why are you looking in the attic?"
And their answer, what did they say?
They told her that in missing person cases like this, it is surprisingly common for individuals to hide in sheds, attics, or outbuildings.
To hide?
Or to have a medical episode there, a stroke, a fall, or to harm themselves there. They were looking for a body on the premises. It was a procedural necessity for them.
Wow.
But here is the critical systemic failure, or let's call it a systemic blind spot, that Caroline's work later highlights. The police did not categorize Steve as high risk.
Why not? I don't understand that. A man is missing. He's not answering his phone. He didn't show up for work. How is that not high risk?
Because there was no paper trail. This is so important. Steve had no documented history of mental illness. He'd never attempted suicide before. He wasn't known to social services. In the eyes of the algorithm, the risk assessment tool they use, he was a stable, employed, middle-aged man with a family. He didn't fit the profile of someone in imminent danger.
So being normal actually worked against him. His stability on paper made him seem safe.
It paradoxically put him in more danger because the urgency of the search was categorized at a lower level. He was invisible to the system precisely because he looked like the system.
That's chilling. So 2 days pass. The limbo ends on a Wednesday morning. Caroline looks out her window and sees a police car pull up. 2 officers get out, and she says she knew instantly, before they even knocked on the door.
It was the hats.
The hats. Tell me about the hats.
She saw them take their uniform hats off as they walked up the path. It's a universal, almost military signal of respect for the dead. You don't take your hat off to tell someone their husband has a flat tire. You don't take your hat off for good news.
Her mother answers the door. Caroline just hears a scream, and then the officers are in her living room. And the words they use are very, very precise. They didn't say, "We're sorry he died."
No. The wording was blunt, almost clinical. He is not alive, and it's clear he has done it to himself.
It is clear he has done it to himself. In one sentence, the car accident theory is dead. The "he ran away to start a new life" fantasy is dead. The "he's had a medical episode" hope is dead.
In that one sentence, she is instantly and violently transported into a new reality, the reality of a suicide survivor.
And this is where the article really shifts, and where our deep dive has to shift too, because the moment that initial shock wears off, and honestly, even before it wears off, the second phase begins.
The phase of hindsight, the phase of guilt.
The phase of why and what if and how did I miss it?
Exactly. Caroline spent a long, long time tormenting herself with those questions. She scanned every memory, every conversation, every text message, looking for the clue she must have missed. And through that agonizing process, she developed a metaphor that I think is the most valuable and practical tool in this entire source material.
She calls it the tunnel.
The tunnel.
Let's break this down, because we hear the phrase tunnel vision all the time as a cliche, but she means something much more specific and psychological, right?
She absolutely does. She's describing a psychological state that researchers call cognitive constriction. Think of it this way. Imagine you are standing in a wide open field on a sunny day. You can see the whole horizon. You can see multiple paths to your left and right. You see exits everywhere. That is a healthy mind.
Okay, I'm with you. A healthy mind sees options.
It sees options. If this job fails, I can get another one. If I have this problem, I can try A, B, or C to solve it. Now imagine at the edge of that field, there's the entrance to a long, dark tunnel. When you first step inside, what Caroline calls the mouth of the tunnel, you can still hear the birds outside. You can still see the bright light of the field behind you. You are still connected to that world of options.
And this is the critical point for her.
This is everything. Caroline believes that this is the moment where intervention is most powerful. If someone reaches in and grabs your hand when you're just at the mouth of the tunnel, they can pull you back out into the field.
But Steve wasn't at the mouth anymore.
No. The further you walk into that tunnel, the darker it gets. The walls feel like they're closing in. The light from the field behind you fades to a pinprick, and then it's gone. Your brain stops processing options. It can only process one thing: escape.
And the only escape you can see is the other end of the tunnel.
Except the other end of the tunnel isn't an exit into another field. In this state of cognitive constriction, the only thing you can see, the only logical solution to end the unbearable pain, is death. It ceases to be a choice, and it becomes a perceived necessity.
So when Caroline looks back with this new framework, she's looking for the moments when Steve might have been at the mouth of that tunnel. She's asking herself, when could I have reached in? When could I have pulled him back? Were there signs?
There were, but, and this is the most crucial part for our listeners, for all of us, they did not look like signs of suicide. They looked like the normal stresses of modern life.
Let's list them out, because I think a lot of people listening will recognize these signs in their own friends or partners or even themselves. And that's the really scary part.
Okay, so first, the career. On paper, Steve was a successful manager, but he had been, in Caroline's words, viciously bullied by a client in a previous role.
We do not talk about that enough. Workplace bullying among adults, grown men being bullied in a corporate setting. We think of bullying as a playground thing, or maybe something that happens to junior employees.
It is rampant, and it destroys a person's self-worth just as effectively in a 47-year-old as it does in a 14-year-old. So Steve had taken a new job to escape that awful situation. On paper, he was turning a corner. He was managing a new team.
But Caroline noticed something was off. He wasn't excited. He wasn't relieved. He was just flat.
He was flat, and she rationalized it. And I think every single one of us would have done the same thing. She thought, he's 47. We have a toddler waking us up at night. He's just tired. He's just aging.
She normalized it.
She normalized it. So that's red flag number one, a profound lack of an expected emotion, a flatness where there should have been relief or joy.
Okay, what else?
Then there was the financial pressure. A few weeks before he died, Steve told her he wanted to quit the new job. He was clearly struggling with it. And Caroline, looking at the mortgage, the 2 kids, the bills, she did what any responsible partner would do.
She said no.
She said, we can't afford for you to quit right now. We need the paycheck.
God, that's a heavy one. I can feel listeners wincing at that because we have all had that conversation or a version of it. Just suck it up for a bit longer. We have bills to pay. It's a responsible thing to say.
It is an entirely responsible and logical thing to say in a normal conversation about finances. Caroline says that moment haunted her for a very long time. She felt she had slammed the door on his only escape route.
But she eventually came to a different conclusion, right?
Yes. She realized she was having a conversation about budgeting. He, on the other hand, was having a conversation about survival. They were standing in the same room, but living in 2 completely different realities. She couldn't have known the stakes were life and death because he never told her he was in the tunnel. He just said he wanted to quit his job.
The language is just. It's not calibrated to the danger.
Not at all. And there was one other sign. The Gary Speed conversation. This feels like something out of a screenplay, but it was real.
For listeners who might not know, Gary Speed was a very famous, very successful Welsh footballer and manager.
And he took his own life in 2011. It was a massive shock to the public here in the UK. A beloved sports hero. It just didn't make sense to anyone.
So what about him?
A few days before Steve died, he was at the pub with a friend, and he brought up Gary Speed, completely out of the blue. He just wanted to talk about it. Why would a man like that do it? How could that happen?
And his friend's reaction?
His friend just thought they were talking about football. Just pub chatter. A sad story about a famous person.
But in hindsight...
In hindsight, it's clear Steve was testing the waters. He was exploring the idea. He was likely thinking, here is a successful, admired man, a husband and father who did this. Maybe it's a valid option for me. But because he didn't say, I'm thinking about doing what Gary Speed did, the clue was completely missed.
It's terrifying how subtle these things are. It's like they're written in invisible ink, and the ink only appears after you hold it up to the heat of the tragedy.
That is a perfect analogy. And that's why Caroline's mission is so vital. She wants to teach us how to read the invisible ink before the heat is applied. She wants us to spot the person who is just hovering at the mouth of the tunnel.
Okay, so we've talked about the lead up. We need to talk about the impact. Because Steve's pain ended on November 12th. But for everyone else in his life, the pain was just beginning. And the hardest part of this story for me to read, the part that genuinely made me feel sick to my stomach, was Evie.
The walk to the school.
The walk to the school. Caroline has just been told her husband is dead. By suicide, the police are still in her house, and she has this horrifying realization that it's nearly the end of the school day, and she has to go pick up her 9-year-old daughter.
She has to walk to that school gate, look her child in the eye, and essentially detonate her entire world.
She describes seeing Evie standing at the gate. The deputy head is there with her. Evie looks up, sees her mom, and this big, innocent smile spreads across her face.
It's the last moment of her childhood innocence. The last moment where her dad is still alive in her mind, just at work, due to pick her up from Cubs later.
And then Evie sees Caroline's face properly, and the smile just drops.
And she started crying before Caroline even said a word.
She knew.
Children are incredibly intuitive. They're like emotional barometers. They absorb the atmosphere. They can read our micro-expressions faster and more accurately than most adults. She knew something was catastrophically wrong.
Now here is something I found really unexpected. Caroline talks about her own emotions in the days and weeks that followed. You'd expect pure sorrow, right? Despair, grief. But she says her primary emotion, the overwhelming one, was anger.
Furious, white-hot anger.
But is that allowed? I mean, culturally, are you allowed to be mad at the person who has just died in such a tragic way?
It is absolutely allowed, and it's not just allowed. It is a necessary and incredibly common part of this specific kind of grief. She was furious at Steve. She felt he had abandoned her. He had left her with 2 children, a mortgage, and what she so bleakly calls the admin of death.
The admin of death. That sounds like a bureaucracy from hell.
It is. It's all the practical, soul-crushing stuff that nobody ever warns you about. Calling the bank to freeze his accounts, canceling his mobile phone contract, dealing with the life insurance company's endless questions, the inquest, the coroner's report.
And the funeral. She talks about the horror of a funeral that's held too soon, where nobody knows what to say to you because of the stigma.
That stigma is a huge part of it. It's so different from a death by, say, a heart attack, isn't it? If you died of a heart attack, people would be bringing casseroles, sharing fond memories, hugging you.
But with suicide, people cross the street to avoid you.
They do. They are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they end up saying nothing at all. And that silence is what isolates the family even more.
But Carolyn made a very specific, very brave choice right from the beginning. She decided she would not be ashamed. She would not lie.
She contacted a UK charity called Winston's Wish. They specialize in supporting bereaved children.
And their advice was critical, wasn't it?
It was categorical, they said. Do not lie to the children. Do not tell them he had a heart attack. Do not tell them he went away or went to sleep. You have to tell them the truth in an age-appropriate way.
But how? How do you tell a 9-year-old and a 2-year-old that their daddy killed himself? That feels just unimaginably traumatic.
You reframe it. The narrative that Caroline and the charity worked on, and this is a gold standard for anyone listening who might find themselves in this awful situation, is this. Daddy was desperately unwell.
Unwell, not bad or selfish.
Exactly. Not Daddy was weak, not Daddy didn't love us anymore, but Daddy had an illness in his mind that got so bad, he died from it.
That's a powerful distinction.
It's everything, because it separates the person they loved from the act that killed him. It protects the children from internalizing the abandonment. It wasn't a rejection of them. It was a terminal symptom of a devastating illness. It allows them to continue to love their father while hating the illness that took him.
And that honesty, that difficult, brave honesty, seems to have paid off in the long run. Because we fast forward in the source material. We jump ahead to 2025. Evie is in year 11 now.
She's a teenager. And she stands up in front of her entire school in an assembly, and she speaks about suicide.
That is just, I mean, the courage that takes. I couldn't have done that at that age. I can barely do it now as an adult.
It's incredible. And the ripple effect of that courage is immediate and tangible. Caroline shares this one little story about a boy in that assembly. You know, year 11 boys, they're not exactly known for their emotional vulnerability.
No, not at all. They travel in packs. They deflect everything with humor.
The cool armor is up at all times. They are terrified of looking soft or weak in front of their friends.
Right.
But after Evie spoke, this one boy broke away from his pack of friends. He walked straight up to Evie, shook her hand, and just said, "That was incredible."
Oh, wow. That one small act. That's the ripple effect reversing, isn't it? Steve's death created this devastating negative ripple. Evie's courage starts a positive one.
Precisely. But Carolyn didn't just stop with her family. She had this realization that Steve's story wasn't just a domestic tragedy. It was fundamentally a workplace issue.
This is the part of the story that just fascinates me. Her response to this grief wasn't to retreat. She didn't just go to therapy groups, which would be totally understandable. She went to LinkedIn. She went to the construction industry.
She went to where the men are. She tells this incredible story about being invited to speak to a construction firm. And you have to picture the room. 300 men in high-vis jackets and steel-toed boots. A very tough crowd.
I can picture it perfectly. Arms crossed, probably thinking, why are we being forced to listen to this lady during our workday?
Exactly. It's a hyper-masculine environment. But she gets up and she just tells her story. She tells them about Steve and the throat sweets and the phone call.
And what happened?
By the end of her talk, she said she counted at least 20 of them, these big, tough construction workers openly weeping in their seats. That's when she realized the power of her story. She realized that if she just stands up and tells the truth, and just one of those men goes home and says to his wife, "I think I'm struggling," or even just says to himself, "You know what, I'm not going to do it today," then she has won. She has saved a life.
And she took this mission all the way to the top, didn't she? The BSI.
The British Standards Institution. This is an organization that, they usually decide how strong concrete needs to be for a bridge or how safe a ladder has to be to get a certification. It's all about physical safety standards.
Very technical stuff.
Very. And Caroline went to them and worked with them to create a national standard for suicide and the workplace.
So treating psychological safety with the same rigor and seriousness as physical safety.
That's the goal. It's called the First Steps Guide. It's a playbook for companies. And since it launched in November, it's already been downloaded 8,500 times in over 100 countries.
That's 8,500 workplaces, from construction sites to corporate offices, that now have a formal guide, a protocol that they just didn't have before Steve died.
The ripple effect just keeps getting wider.
Okay, so we have the story. We have the systemic change that it inspired. But I want to spend the rest of our time on the listeners, on you, because Caroline didn't just provide a story in this article, she provided a toolkit. She gives 5 key actionable pieces of advice for all of us.
These are the practical takeaways. If you forget everything else from this deep dive, please remember these 5 points.
Point number 1, spotting changes. We've talked about Steve being frustrated or flat, but what else should we be looking for?
The key thing is that it's about a deviation from their normal baseline, not some generic checklist. So are they sleeping way more or way less than usual? Are they withdrawing from hobbies or social events they used to love? Are they expressing feelings of hopelessness or being a burden?
Okay, those seem fairly intuitive.
They do, but the big one, the one that is often a sign of acute risk and is so often missed, is what's called putting affairs in order.
You mean like suddenly writing a will?
It could be that, but it's often more subtle. It could be suddenly cleaning the house or their office from top to bottom, giving away a prized collection of records or books, calling up old friends to repay small forgotten debts.
Why? What's the psychology behind that?
It implies they are preparing to exit. It's a form of cleaning up the mess before they go, so they don't leave things in a state for others to deal with. If you see someone who is usually messy or disorganized suddenly organizing their entire life, that is a massive red flag.
Okay, that's a really important one. Now, point number 2, and I think this is the hardest one for most people, asking directly.
This is where the myths literally kill people.
Yeah.
There is this persistent, dangerous belief that if I ask you, are you thinking about suicide? I am somehow planting the idea in your head, like it's a scene from the movie Inception.
Right. The fear is that if I don't say the word doesn't exist. And if I bring it up, I might be the one to push you over the edge.
All the available research shows this is categorical nonsense. Asking directly and compassionately does not cause suicide. In fact, for someone who is deep in that tunnel, being asked that direct question is often a massive, massive relief.
A relief. Why?
Because finally, someone sees them. Finally, the secret is out in the open, and they don't have to carry the terrible weight of it all by themselves anymore.
So let's role play this for the listener. I have a friend, let's call him Dave. Dave is acting weird. He's showing some of those signs. I'm scared to ask, what do I actually say? Do I say something vague like, don't do anything stupid?
No, absolutely not. Avoid any language that implies judgment. Stupid implies shame, and shame is the last thing they need. You need to be calm, private, and direct.
Give me the words.
You could say something like, Dave, I've noticed you've been really down lately, and honestly, I'm worried about you. Sometimes when people feel this way, they think about ending their life. I have to ask, are you thinking about suicide? Or even more directly, are you thinking about killing yourself?
Are you thinking about killing yourself? You use the actual words, no euphemisms.
You have to use the words. Don't say hurting yourself, because that could just mean non-suicidal self-harm. Don't say doing something silly. Be clear, be direct, and be prepared for the answer. If the answer is yes, do not panic.
And that's point 3, taking disclosures seriously. If Dave says yes, or even maybe, or I don't know, I just want the pain to stop, what do I do next?
You believe him, 100%. The worst thing you can say is, oh, you don't really mean that. You have so much to live for.
Why is that the worst thing?
Because you've just shut him down completely. You've told him that his pain isn't real and that you can't handle the truth of it. He will never open up to you again. Instead, you say something like, thank you for telling me. That must be incredibly hard to carry. I am here with you now. We'll figure this out together.
And then we get to point 4, be prepared to help. This is the now what phase. I'm not a therapist. I can't fix Dave's brain chemistry.
You don't have to be the therapist. You just have to be the bridge to professional help. Before you even have that conversation, if you're worried, you should do your homework. Know the numbers. What's the number for the National Suicide Hotline in your country? Does your company have an employee assistance program?
So you have the resources ready.
Exactly. And if the danger is immediate,
Yeah.
if he tells you he has a specific plan and he has the means to carry it out, you escalate. You call emergency services. You do not leave him alone under any circumstances. You become the safety net until the professionals can arrive.
Okay. And finally, point 5. This one is for the people who are left behind, the bereaved. This is for the friends of Caroline.
The advice here is so simple, but so rarely followed. It is. Keep showing up.
What do you mean?
The lasagna and the casserole stop coming after 2 weeks. The flood of text messages stops after a month. But the grief lasts forever. It changes, but it doesn't go away. So set a reminder in your phone to check in on your widowed or bereaved friend 3 months later, 6 months later, on the anniversary of the death.
And Caroline says you don't need to have the perfect words.
No. Silence is so much worse than awkwardness. Just a simple text that says, "Hey, I was just thinking of you today. I don't know what to say, but I'm here." That is more than enough. That is a lifeline.
Before we wrap up, there is one final story from the source material that it really gave me a huge sense of closure for Caroline. It's what she calls the Brisbane podcast revelation.
This is a beautiful moment in her story. Years later, she's an advocate. She's doing interviews all over the world. She's on a podcast with a mental health director from a hospital in Brisbane, Australia. And he throws her a complete curveball of a question.
What did he ask?
He asked her, "Caroline, what would Steve say if he was standing in front of you right now?"
Wow. That's a risky question to ask a grieving widow. That could have backfired horribly.
It could have. But Caroline said she didn't even hesitate. She knew the answer instantly. She realized that Steve wouldn't be angry. He wouldn't be defensive about his choice. He wouldn't be trying to justify it.
So what would he say?
He would just be so sorry.
He would be sorry for the pain he caused.
Exactly. She realized in that moment that he was just a good man in unimaginable pain who made a tragic, irreversible mistake while he was deep inside the tunnel. He didn't do it to hurt her. And she says that in that moment, the blame just evaporated.
Of all the blame she'd been carrying.
She stopped blaming herself for the throat sweets and the budgeting conversation. And crucially, she finally stopped blaming him for leaving.
That is a powerful, powerful place to land after so much trauma. Forgiveness. Forgiveness for both of them.
It is. And it brings us right back to those statistics. 17.6 deaths per 100,000 for men, 3 times higher than for women. Every single one of those numbers is a Steve. And every single one of them leaves behind a Caroline, an Evie, and an Ada.
So as we close this open mic session, I want to issue a challenge to everyone listening. Usually we challenge you to, try a new productivity app or read a business book. Today, the challenge is very different.
Look at your circle. Look at your colleagues at work. Look at your friends, especially the strong ones, especially the funny ones who are always the life of the party.
Ask yourself, are they just frustrated and worried about work and life? Or could they be hovering at the mouth of the tunnel?
You don't need a degree in psychology to save a life. You just need to have the courage to ask the question.
Are you thinking about killing yourself?
It's a terrifying question to ask, but the silence that comes from not asking is infinitely more terrifying.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. It was a heavy one, but I think it might be the most important one we've ever done.
Take care of yourselves. And please, take care of each other.